The Alaskan wilderness was merciless. The wind howled through the towering pines, carrying with it an unforgiving chill that seeped into every crevice of the land. Snow stretched endlessly in every direction, blanketing the earth in a deceptive, pristine beauty. Beneath its surface, however, the wilderness was a battlefield, a place where survival was never guaranteed. Park Ranger Daniel Carter had seen his fair share of brutal winters, but something about this one felt different. It was as if the land itself had been swallowed by silence, an eerie stillness that set his instincts on edge. His snow boots crunched against the frozen ground as he made his way along the riverbank, the air so cold that each breath burned his lungs. Then he saw it. At first, it was just a shape in the distance, a dark figure standing motionless against the white expanse of the frozen river. Daniel squinted, adjusting the scarf wrapped around his face. A bear? This deep into winter? It wasn't unheard of, but it was rare. Most bears would be tucked away in dens by now, hidden from the relentless grasp of the cold. As he stepped closer, details emerged. It was a massive grizzly, her thick fur dusted with snow and ice. She stood completely still, her broad shoulders squared, head slightly lowered. At her feet, two smaller shapes huddled together. Cubs, Daniel's pulse quickened. Something was wrong. Bears didn't just stand still like that. Not in the cold. Not unless something was very, very wrong. "Hey there, big girl," Daniel murmured cautiously, his gloved hand instinctively reaching for the tranquilizer rifle slung across his back. His training told him to be wary. Grizzlies were fiercely protective of their young. But as he moved closer, his caution twisted into something else. A deep, gnawing dread. The mother bear wasn't watching him. She wasn't watching anything. Daniel's breath hitched. She wasn't moving, not even a twitch. His steps slowed, then stopped. The cubs, barely larger than husky puppies, whimpered weakly against their mother's massive front legs. Their tiny bodies shivered uncontrollably, their fur thin compared to hers. And yet she didn't react to their cries. Daniel took another cautious step forward, and the truth hit him like a punch to the gut. The mother bear was frozen solid. The realization sent a shiver, not from the cold but from something deeper, more primal, racing down Daniel's spine. The frost clung to her fur in unnatural patches, her powerful limbs locked in place, her black eyes glazed over with an eerie stillness. She had died standing up. A sickening weight settled in Daniel's chest. How long had she been like this? Hours? A day? The storm from last night had been brutal, and he could only imagine the battle she had fought against it. He looked at the cubs, small, fragile, helpless. Their mother had done everything she could to shield them from the storm, standing between them and the wind, her massive body their only barrier against the biting cold. And in doing so, she had perished. Daniel swallowed hard. Cold was bad, but it wasn't this bad. A bear this size should have survived. Something else must have weakened her first, hunger, exhaustion, or something even worse. Cubs gave another weak cry, snapping him out of his thoughts. He had no time to waste. If their mother had succumbed to the cold, they wouldn't last much longer. Daniel's mind raced. He was alone. No backup. No shelter nearby. Only his wits and the supplies in his pack. The storm wasn't over. And neither was the danger. As he knelt beside the cubs, reaching out a tentative hand, a distant sound made his blood run colder than the ice beneath him. A long, low howl. Not one. Not two. A pack. The wolves had found them. The howl sent a jolt of adrenaline through Daniel's body. He whipped his head toward the tree line, his breath curling in the freezing air. The sound had come from the west, deep in the forest, but he knew wolves well enough to understand what it meant. They had caught the scent of something vulnerable. Cubs whimpered again, pressing against their frozen mother, their tiny bodies barely moving. Daniel's heart pounded as he scanned the area. He was out in the open. No cover. No shelter, asterisk asterisk, just the frozen river stretching behind him and the shadowy treeline ahead. And somewhere in that darkness they were watching. Daniel had seen wolves before, majestic, intelligent, and ruthless when hunger took hold. Normally, they wouldn't dare approach a grizzly, even cubs, for fear of their mother's wrath. But tonight the balance had shifted. The wolves weren't just hunting. They were waiting for the cold to finish what it had started. Daniel turned back to the cubs, urgency replacing his shock. If he hesitated, they would be nothing more than a meal for the starving pack. He crouched low, slowly reaching out. "Easy, little ones," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. One of the cubs let out a weak growl, feebly swiping at the air. It was terrified, the other barely moved, its body limp, eyes fluttering open and closed. That one wouldn't last much longer. Daniel stripped off his thick winter coat, the icy wind biting into him instantly. He didn't care. He had to act fast. Carefully, he scooped both cubs up, wrapping them inside the coat's insulation. They squirmed at first, but they were too weak to fight. The warmth of his body was the only thing keeping them from slipping away. Another howl rang out, this time closer. Daniel's stomach twisted. He was running out of time. Think Carter. Think asterisk asterisk. He scanned the terrain. The closest ranger station was at least 6 miles away. He'd never make it on foot with 2 cubs in his arms and wolves closing in. He needed shelter. He needed fire. His eyes landed on the frozen river. It was thick, strong enough to hold his weight. If he followed it downstream, it might lead to a cave or at least a rock formation where he could build a fire and keep the cubs safe. The wolves wouldn't risk crossing the ice. Would they? He didn't wait to find out. With the cubs bundled against his chest, he took a deep breath and ran. The snow crunched beneath his boots as he sprinted toward the river, his legs burning from the cold and effort. The weight of the cubs slowed him down, but he pushed forward, his breath coming in sharp, painful bursts. Then, asterisk asterisk, a snap, asterisk asterisk. A branch cracked somewhere behind him. Daniel didn't dare look back. He could hear them now, paws skimming over the snow, breath misting in the night. The pack was moving. Hunting. The river was just ahead. 50 yards. 40 asterisk asterisk. He lunged forward, his boots skidding as he hit the ice. The surface groaned under his weight but held firm. Cubs stirred against him, their weak cries muffled by his coat. 30 yards. The howls turned to growls. The wolves had reached the riverbank, their dark forms appearing in the moonlight. Yellow eyes glowed like fire, stalking him from the safety of the snow. But they didn't step onto the ice. Daniel forced himself to keep moving, his feet slipping as he half walked, half slid across the frozen river. The wolves paced at the edge, their hunger palpable, but the ice was his advantage. They wouldn't risk it. At least that's what he thought. Then the alpha emerged. Larger than the others, its fur a mix of silver and black, the wolf stepped forward, testing the ice with one cautious paw. Daniel's stomach clenched. This one was different, smarter, hungrier. Took another step. Then another. The ice groaned beneath them both. Daniel's pulse thundered in his ears. The cave, asterisk asterisk there, asterisk asterisk just ahead, a small, rocky outcrop jutted from the frozen landscape. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. If he could just reach it before. Crack. The sound ripped through the silence like a gunshot. Daniel froze. The wolf froze. Then, in an instant, the ice shattered beneath them. Daniel had only seconds to react. He lunged forward, throwing himself and the cubs onto solid ground just as freezing water swallowed the wolf behind him. A desperate, snarling yelp filled the air, followed by splashes as the ice broke apart, dragging the creature into the river's icy depths. Daniel gasped, his chest heaving. Cubs whimpered, pressed tight against his body. He turned his head. The rest of the pack had vanished into the darkness. For now. Daniel didn't waste a second. He crawled into the small cave, shielding the cubs from the wind, his fingers shaking as he pulled out his emergency fire-starting kit. He needed warmth. Fast. The mother bear had given everything to protect her cubs. Now it was his turn. Cave was small, barely deep enough for Daniel to sit up straight. Its walls were rough and jagged, carved by time and the relentless Alaskan winds. The entrance was wide enough to see the frozen river outside, where chunks of shattered ice bobbed in the dark water. Somewhere beneath the surface, the wolf had disappeared. Daniel didn't care. Right now, his focus was on the cubs. His fingers trembled as he unwrapped them from his coat. The smaller one was dangerously still, its tiny body barely rising and falling with each breath. The other shifted weakly, blinking up at him with unfocused eyes. They were alive, but just barely. His teeth clenched. Not on my watch. With shaking hands, Daniel dug into his survival pack, pulling out a waterproof bag of supplies. His fingers were numb, but he forced himself to work quickly. He needed fire, he needed it now. The wind outside howled like a living thing, carrying with it the distant, haunting cries of the wolf pack. They weren't gone. Just waiting. But right now, they weren't the biggest threat. Cold was. Daniel reached for his emergency fire-starting kit, a small metal tin that held dry tinder, a flint, and a small supply of fire gel. He stacked a few loose twigs from his pack onto the cave floor, then struck the flint against steel. Nothing. His stomach twisted. Not now. He struck again, harder this time. A spark caught, glowing weakly before fizzling out. Damn it, his hands were shaking too much. He gritted his teeth, forced himself to steady his grip, and struck again. A tiny flame flickered to life. Daniel shielded it with his body, feeding it with the fire gel, coaxing it into something bigger. Twigs smoked, then caught flame. The orange glow painted the cave walls, chasing away the icy grip of death. A ragged breath escaped his lips. Fire. Finally, ***. He adjusted his coat, pulling the cubs closer to the warmth. The larger one stirred first, letting out a weak, barely audible whimper. Good. That was good. ***. The smaller one, however, remained still. Too still. Daniel pressed a hand to its tiny chest. A heartbeat, ***, faint, but there, ***. Come on, little guy, he murmured, rubbing gentle circles over its body, trying to get the blood flowing. He wasn't a vet, but he knew enough. ***, hypothermia was taking hold. ***, if he didn't warm it up fast, it wouldn't make it through the next hour. The fire crackled softly, pushing back the shadows. The wind outside carried another sound. ***, the slow, rhythmic patting of paws against ice and snow. ***. Daniel tensed. The wolves were back. He peered out from the cave, heart hammering. Yellow eyes for. No, ***, 6 pairs. ***. They were circling just beyond the shattered ice. The river had bought him time, but not safety. They knew he was trapped. And they were patient. Daniel exhaled slowly, calculating. The fire was too small to keep them away for long. He had a hunting knife, but it was no match for an entire pack. The only thing keeping the wolves at bay was the unknown. They didn't know how strong he was. They didn't know how much fight he had left. He had to make sure they never found out. The larger cub whimpered again, shifting against his chest. The smaller one remained limp, barely responsive. Daniel gritted his teeth. He needed something more. Digging back into his pack, he pulled out a sealed protein bar. It wasn't much, but it had calories. ***, fuel for survival. ***. He broke off a small piece, gently pressing it against the cub's mouth. Nothing. His chest tightened. Come on. He pressed again, this time rubbing the cub's tiny throat, urging it to swallow. A flicker of movement, then a weak, feeble lick. Daniel nearly collapsed with relief. That's it, little guy, he whispered. Stay with me. The fire burned brighter, its warmth creeping through his frozen limbs. Cubs were alive. And as long as they were breathing, he wasn't giving up. Inside, the wolves waited. Inside, Daniel prepared. The night was far from over. Moving to chapter 4. The wolves are watching? Smiling face with smiling eyes. The fire crackled softly, casting flickering shadows against the jagged cave walls. The warmth was spreading, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. Daniel kept his arms wrapped around the cubs, shielding them from the lingering cold. The larger one had stopped shivering, its breaths coming steadier now. A good sign, but the smaller one was still unresponsive, its body limp against his chest. Daniel pressed his fingers against its tiny ribs. The heartbeat was still there, but barely. "Stay with me, little guy." He gently rubbed its fur, trying to stimulate blood flow. Every few minutes, he pressed another small piece of the protein bar against its lips, coaxing it to eat. A flicker of movement. A weak swallow. It wasn't much, but it was something. Inside, the storm had eased, but the cold remained relentless. And so did the wolves. Daniel could feel them watching. Slowly, he turned his head toward the entrance. 6 pairs of eyes, low shapes moving between the trees, pacing in the snow. Their breaths came in soft, misty clouds curling in the freezing air. The alpha was back, the huge silver-black wolf that had tested the ice before it shattered. Daniel's stomach clenched at the sight of it. Creature had survived. Its fur was wet, its body tense, but it stood tall, its golden eyes locked on him. Pack remained behind it, waiting. Silent. This wasn't over. Daniel shifted slightly, making sure his knife was within reach. It wasn't much, just a standard survival blade, but if it came down to it, he'd use every ounce of strength he had left. He wasn't dying in this cave. And neither were the cubs. The fire crackled again, its warmth creeping up his arms. The wolves edged closer. Daniel's breath slowed. They weren't rushing in, that was good. Wolves were strategic hunters. They wouldn't attack unless they were certain of their advantage. Right now, they were waiting for something. A weakness. A mistake. His gaze flickered to the cubs. The larger one stirred, pressing its tiny body closer to him. The smaller one let out a faint sound, a whimper so soft it was barely audible. The alpha's ears perked. Daniel's stomach turned. It had heard. Pack leader took another step forward, paws pressing into the snow just beyond the shattered ice. It wouldn't cross the river, not yet, but it was testing the boundaries. Daniel needed to send a message. Slowly, never taking his eyes off the wolves, he reached into his pack and pulled out a flare. The wolves didn't react. Not yet. With practiced fingers, he twisted the cap, activating the ignition strip. Whoosh! The flare ignited in a brilliant red blaze, sending a harsh glow into the night. The wolves flinched, eyes flashing in the sudden light. Daniel stood, his breath steady. "Not tonight," he muttered. He stepped toward the entrance, raising the flare high. The wolves hesitated. The alpha bared its teeth, lips curling in a silent snarl, but it didn't advance. Not yet. Daniel took another step forward, the firelight painting his face in crimson. The wolves were hungry, but they weren't suicidal. For a long moment they just stood there, the cold wind whipping between them. Then, the alpha turned ***. With a low, guttural growl, it signaled the pack. One by one, the wolves melted back into the trees, their dark forms vanishing into the night. Daniel let out a slow breath, but he didn't relax. They weren't gone. Just waiting. The flare burned in his hand, its light casting eerie shadows against the snow. He knew the truth. This was far from over. He turned back to the cave, kneeling beside the cubs. The smaller one stirred again, its tiny body warming against his chest. They had survived another night. But dawn was still hours away. And the wolves would return. The flare had bought him time. But not enough. The wolves had retreated, their glowing eyes vanishing into the tree line, but Daniel knew they were still there, waiting. watching, hungry. Inside the cave, the fire burned low, its warmth barely pushing back the cold. Daniel huddled close, his body wrapped around the cubs like a living shield. He couldn't let them freeze. The larger cub shifted in his arms, pressing against his chest, its fur warmed by the fire. The smaller one still barely breathing. Daniel swallowed hard. "Come on, little guy. Stay with me, asterisk asterisk." He rubbed slow, gentle circles over its body, trying to keep the blood flowing. Every few minutes, he broke off a piece of the protein bar, pressing it against its lips. Each time, the cub barely reacted. "This is bad." Daniel reached into his pack, fingers searching for anything useful. His supplies were running low. One more protein bar, half a bottle of water, a single flare left. His mind raced. He needed a plan. The ranger station was still at least 6 miles away. He had no radio, no signal. If he tried to hike there now, in the dead of night, the wolves would tear him apart before he made it half a mile. No, that wasn't an option. He had to hold out until dawn. Outside, the wind howled, carrying with it the soft, rhythmic crunch of snow. Footsteps. Daniel stiffened. Slowly, he turned his head toward the entrance. Yellow eyes flickered in the dark. Pack had returned. A low growl rumbled through the night, deep and resonant. Daniel's stomach tightened as he spotted the alpha. The massive wolf stood at the edge of the riverbank, shoulders tense, head lowered. It was testing him. The rest of the pack remained in the shadows, their dark shapes moving between the trees. They were waiting for a moment of weakness. Daniel tightened his grip on his knife. He knew the rules of survival. Asterisk asterisk wolves didn't attack unless they were certain of the kill. Asterisk asterisk right now, the fire and his presence were keeping them at bay. But that wouldn't last forever. A sudden, weak whimper pulled his attention back to the cubs. The smaller one stirred slightly, its tiny paws twitching against his chest. A sign of life. Daniel's throat tightened. "I can't lose you." He adjusted his coat, pulling the cubs closer, his body shivering from the cold. His own energy was fading fast. If he passed out now, it was over. He needed to stay awake. He needed to fight. The fire crackled, but it was dying. Not enough wood. Daniel's mind raced. He needed to keep the flames going, but leaving the cave to find more fuel meant exposing himself to the wolves. The alpha let out another low growl, stepping forward. The ice on the river had thickened again, solid enough for a crossing. It knew that now. Daniel reached for the last flare. If they charged, this was all he had left. The fire flickered, casting eerie shadows across the cave walls. The wind outside shifted, howling like a living thing. And then, asterisk asterisk, a sound that made Daniel's blood run cold. Asterisk asterisk. A second growl. But this one closer. Inside the cave. Daniel's heart stopped. Slowly, he turned his head, his breath catching in his throat. A lone wolf stood at the back of the cave. It had been there the whole time. Watching. Waiting. And now it was between him and the only exit. Cave suddenly felt smaller. Daniel's breath hitched as his eyes locked onto the wolf standing at the back of the cave. It was young but lean, its fur a mottled mix of gray and brown. Its eyes glowed like embers in the dim firelight. How long had it been there? Daniel's mind raced. Pack must have sent it in while he was distracted. A scout, a silent observer. Waiting for an opening. The wolf's lips curled back, exposing sharp white teeth. It was close, too close. Daniel shifted slowly, positioning his body between the cubs and the predator. His hand tightened around the knife strapped to his belt. Outside, the alpha growled. The pack was watching, waiting to see how this played out. They weren't just testing him now. They were hunting. Daniel knew the rules of the wild. Asterisk asterisk wolves didn't waste energy unless they were sure of the kill. Asterisk asterisk, this wasn't a reckless attack. It was strategy. Pack was forcing him to make a move. If he lunged, the wolf might retreat, or it might strike first. If he waited too long, the others might move in. His pulse pounded in his ears. Think. The fire crackled weakly behind him. Not enough fuel left. His last flare was in his pack. If he reached for it, the wolf might see it as a weakness. An opening. Daniel took a slow, careful breath. Then, he growled, deep. Low. A challenge. The wolf froze, its ears flicked back, its muscles tensing. Daniel held its gaze, unblinking. He didn't move, didn't flinch. He let the firelight cast his shadow large against the cave wall. He wasn't prey. He wasn't weak. He was a threat. The wolf's eyes flickered. It was hesitating. Then, from outside, a second growl, deeper. More commanding. The alpha. The younger wolf twitched. Then, slowly, it backed up. Daniel exhaled, but he didn't move. Not yet. The wolf reached the cave entrance, glanced at him one last time, then vanished into the snow. Daniel let out a shaky breath. His grip on the knife was tight enough to hurt. Inside, the pack remained, still watching, still waiting. They weren't done. But neither was he. He turned back to the cubs, his heart still hammering. The smaller one stirred, just barely. Time was running out. If he wanted to save them, if he wanted to survive, he couldn't wait for dawn, He had to move. Now, Daniel's breath came in slow, steady puffs of white mist. He had minutes, maybe less. The wolves hadn't left. They wouldn't. Not until he was dead. Cubs were pressed against his chest, the smaller one barely stirring. If he waited any longer, it wouldn't survive. I have to move. He reached for his pack, fingers wrapping around his last flare, his heartbeat pounded in his ears. This was his only shot. Carefully, he shifted the cubs into the sling of his coat, securing them tight against his body. Then, with one final deep breath, he ran, into the snow, into the dark, straight toward the wolves. Chorus of growls erupted from the tree line. Pack moved, shapes darted through the shadows, fast, coordinated, hunting as one. Daniel didn't stop. He couldn't. He yanked the flare open. Whoosh! A blinding red blaze lit up the night. The wolves flinched, snarls of confusion echoed around him. They weren't expecting fire. Daniel hurled the flare hard into the nearest snowbank. The sudden explosion of light sent shadows dancing in every direction. The wolves hesitated, startled. That was his opening. Daniel sprinted. Full speed. His boots hammered against the frozen ground. Cubs were dead weight against his chest, his muscles screaming under the strain. But he didn't slow down. He heard them behind him. Pounding of paws. The snap of jaws, the alpha's furious snarl. He was too slow. He wouldn't make it. Then, a miracle, The land sloped downward. The river. Daniel made a split-second decision. He leaped. The frozen ground disappeared beneath him, and suddenly, he was airborne, He crashed down into the icy slope, skidding wildly. Snow exploded around him as he tumbled, twisting his body to shield the cubs. The impact tore through his bones, but he didn't stop moving. Behind him, the wolves hesitated. The drop was steep, the ice slick. They weren't built for this kind of chase. Daniel didn't look back. He kept sliding faster. Down. Away. Then, trees, He crashed through brittle undergrowth, rolling hard. His body slammed into a snowbank, and finally, silence, Daniel gasped for air, chest heaving. His vision swam. He was alive. Cubs stirred against him. They were alive. Slowly, he lifted his head. The wolves stood at the ridge above him, watching, but they didn't follow. Pack had lost their hunt. Daniel let his head drop back against the snow. His body ached, his hands burned from the cold. But through the trees in the distance, cabin, warm light, smoke rising from a chimney, the ranger station. They had made it. With the last of his strength, Daniel pushed himself up. He cradled the cubs in his arms and staggered forward toward safety. The longest night was over. They had survived.